Welcome to my weekly video blog. Today we are continuing with the Getting to Know Me series, and we've reached 1998. You may have heard me talk about this before, but 1998 was my annus mirabilis. That means great and wonderful year. It is so far the best year of my life. And I've explained a few things about it. I've explained how the first part was taken up with the end of the first questioning. I've also explained to you how that first questioning ended with what I would class as close to a conversion experience as somebody who's been brought up in the faith can get. I've also explained to you what came out of it, which was the second testimony. Now, there were several other things that happened during this period of time. The first major thing is that my father, who had been working in the city, his job, he had sort of foresight, I guess, to see that his business, the job that he was in, was becoming more and more unstable. He decided to look for another job, and he found one in Yorkshire. And the problem was that they had got the job and made this decision sort of a little bit too soon for us to move, because they got this in early 1998. And of course, in the fall of 1998, as me and both my sisters were all 2 years apart, we were about to switch in the education system. I'd been doing GCSEs and was about to do A-levels, and one of my other sisters was about to start her GCSEs. Now, my parents had a thought about this, and that was that they would actually wait it out until the next gap, if you like, which would be another 2 years, the fall of 2000. But my father's job was unstable enough for him to have to take the job, and therefore it would be a case of my father commuting, I suppose. He would drive up, do a working week in Yorkshire, and then return to us for the weekend. And my parents lived like that for 2 years, more or less. There was plenty of stuff going on during that period of time. You know, we also had to house hunt, you know, and they settled on a place in Harrogate eventually. We also had to prepare the house that we were in, Swallowbeck, for sale, and that sort of meant all sorts of things, from basically redoing every room. I mean, the lounge was redone, my bedroom was redone, the kitchen was redone, and the upstairs bedroom were redone. So that was, you know, a good deal. A lobby was put in down our hall to separate my room from one of my sisters'. I was in charge of sorting out the garden, which was a large prospect, in fact. I've mentioned before that when we moved in, Swallowbeck was a detached house with a drive on one side and front, side and back gardens on the other. Before the back garden was a large patio area, and before that was there had been 2 conservatories. One conservatory had been taken down, and we converted that into a sort of herb garden. There was also a pond, and that had been drained, but it had been sort of left untended for a long time, and we had to turn that into a sunken garden. There was obviously my vegetable patch, and then the trees right on the border of our garden, with a sort of big field that lay behind, which we rented from the council. Those trees had to be sort of maintained as well. There was 1 cooking apple, 2 eating apples and a pear tree. Now, the sizable field at the bottom of the garden had already been sliced several times. It was sliced once to give the neighbours next door some land that they actually bought from the council, and then it was sliced in half, and the end portion was actually redeveloped into a new build just before we left. So the area that we had was significantly smaller when we left than when we started. As far as I know, the new owners had planned on buying that square from the council and turning it into a sort of miniature orchard. I certainly know that they put up a carport in the drive, but that's about all I know. So my role suddenly went from being, you know, a person, if you like, in the house, to being the only male in the house during the week, with my father returning at the weekend. And that meant that I sort of had to step up a little bit in terms of helping my mother around the house. I was suddenly staying up a lot later, you know, doing chores more, and shutting down the house on an evening, that sort of thing. If I had to say a moment where I sort of grew up, it would probably have been that year as well. So it wasn't just spiritual growth, it was sort of maturity as well. I, of course, during that period did my A-levels, A-level in biology and an advanced General National Vocational Qualification, or GNVQ for short, in health and social care, which I got a distinction in. So I'm quite, you know, that pleases me quite significantly. So the only other thing to sort of say about this time was it was a good time. It's generally thought of as being the time that was, at least in terms of the season, probably the second best I've had. I call it the Tridic season, which is after the 3 role models that I sort of chose for myself during that period of time, and I'm actually not going to tell you who those role models are, so don't even ask. But you know, there was a lot of personal, spiritual development in that point of time. You know, I went through a lot of changes as well. I sort of grew up. I guess that would have been the time in which my voice broke and I could no longer sing with the choir, and you know, that sort of thing as well. The only other episode I suppose I ought to mention was on our holiday to Guernsey in 1999. It was the first time we flew. We had a long journey down, we flew, I had a big meal, I went swimming, and I was sick. And it was literally because I just had, you know, done far too much in one day. But it was the first time that my psychosomatism sort of appeared, if you like. I felt ill for the entire 2 weeks that we were on that island, which is unfortunate because there was actually nothing wrong with me. And as soon as we returned, I remember almost making a conscious decision on the way home that I was fine again. And that was the first time that I had experienced any sort of psychosomatic things, which of course would come up during my annus horribilis, which would be a couple of years later. So it's worth noting that I suppose that's probably when, you know, that the anxiety disorder, when I actually first displayed it, when I first had it. And that really is about it for this week, apart from, of course, the birthdays as ever. There are, whoops, wrong way. There are a number of birthdays this week, so I'm wishing all the following many happy returns when their day comes around. We've got Daniel Faye Blackie. Now that's actually 2 people. There's Daniel Blackie and Faye Blackie, and I'm not quite sure whose birthday it is, so, you know, perhaps they were born on the same day, but I very much doubt it. Mac Frederick from the forum, Simon Flanagan, Jeff Crow, another one from the forum, Wayne Sutcliffe and Greg Wicken. So happy birthday to all of those. I hope they eat lots of cake and have a